Hello. I'm Kamter, your Tavern Keeper, and today we are talking about character creation and development. More importantly, how to make your character feel more unique to your personality. In some cases, most people see certain classes and races as default. Human barbarians, elf rangers, half-elf sorcerers, orc warriors, that kind of thing. And as you play and as you have different groups and you have different kind of parties that assemble, you start seeing the character archetype. The shady rogue who always loves to rob people or stab people, and got the bard who's always charismatic, sleeps with all the ladies, and does a good job doing it. The thing is, as a DM, unfortunately, you start to see these archetypes a lot. And I mean a lot. And there's nothing wrong with that. If it's your first time playing, Pathfinder, Dungeons and Dragons, even something more in the lines of, Shadowrun, where everybody wants to be Neo and that badass cyber hacker, it's hard to really understand how to make something a little bit more unique. Luckily enough, though, both the new Pathfinder playtest and 5th edition for Dungeons & Dragons have started kind of rolling out the more role-playing aspect of these kinds of games. Where in 4th edition and 3rd edition of Dungeons & Dragons and the original Pathfinder was all about more of the gameplay and the combat aspect, where it was more focused on slashing and hacking your way through dungeons and not really that role-playing aspect. And they're putting a new kind of emphasis on characters, and that's where I kind of wanted to talk about this kind of thing. And I have a list of kind of characters that I've seen in the past that I've worked very well with, and just experiences of just kind of something different. Some of the characters I'm talking about are mine, some of them are friends, and it all depends on where you kind of sit as a player. If you're more experienced, you kind of start having ideas for how do I make something different? How do I make something that's more than just the generic fantasy character or the generic hero? I want to make something better than the edgelord that always sits in the corner as chaotic evil. How do I play that middle ground? How do I play the neutral? How do I play the lawful evil? How do I play those groups of characters that really don't get the that require more nuance is the best way to describe it. And one of those characters was a cleric I played. His name was Hebob. The name's dumb, but it has a whole history of MMOs and using it as my first characters in each MMO I play. And he was a cleric. Now, he was a lawful evil cleric who was a patron of the dead, essentially. He was a necromancer, closest thing you can get to a necromancer in the rule set we were playing. And the reason why I created him was for one simple reason. In the Ultimate Equipment book for Pathfinder is a coffin. A fully statted coffin telling you how much the coffin can hold, how large is the coffin, how heavy the coffin is, and how much. And for some reason that stuck out with me. And I was like, I want to make a character that lugs this coffin around. And let the personality kind of build itself off of that. What kind of character would do that? Why would he be carrying the coffin? What's in the coffin? Is he like, caretaker? Is he some sort of thing? So what I did was I created Hebob to be this kind of neutral one-off character that was played in a longer campaign we were doing, but someone else was doing a guest DM spot for a while so I could have a break and get a chance to play. And the group finds him, and he seems relatively normal. He's got a coffin, with him, and he's just having lunch. And everybody's like, oh, you seem like a nice fellow. He's like, oh, thank you. But they didn't see his true intentions for a very long time. I think it was like 3 sessions before we actually saw his true colors when combat started for the first time, and he kicks open the coffin to have a full undead body in there that he uses to raise the undead, and uses it as kind of an animate object. And that is not it's not pure evil. It's a very evil thing to do, but he's still doing it under his practices of lawful evil. So the group is really kind of like, what is going on? And my character is just like, ooh, it's time to fight. Ooh, it's fun to go. So combat rings out, and he's, very charismatic. He's still kind of joking around, acting like it's not a big deal that he just pulled a body out of his coffin and has raised the dead to kill this group of enemies that they're fighting. It was like an army, and the combat ends with him having the zombie chase the enemies and then jump off a bridge to kind of flop on top of them and like crush some of them. And the group's like, wow, he's not bad, but that's some really dark magic. Till they realize that he's taking another corpse and putting it into the coffin for later use. And it's just like, okay, this is really weird. So that's kind of example of using kind of a weird object or kind of gimmick to build into a character. There's a lot more to that story. I might tell more of the full story of that in the later video if you guys are interested. It's probably one of my favorite side characters I've played in a campaign, and yeah, that's just one way to approach it. Most clerics are healers, happy to assist, very do no harm. I think the new Pathfinder book actually has archetypes for what characters would be. So let's see here. Yeah, wizard. What do people expect? What do you look to be? What other people see you as? That kind of hints towards a character development. And it's really cool that, say others probably think that you're an arrogant snob who believes you're smarter than others. You read that and probably you're like, no, my character wouldn't be that. He's very knowledgeable. He's very likable. He's just kind of naive. He doesn't understand his powers. He doesn't have social etiquette, so he's more kind of socially awkward but very charming. You could look at those tips and come up with other ways to approach a character. I had a sorcerer who was very egotistical like this, but I flipped it upside of his head where I wanted him to fail. The whole point of the character was I wanted him to be a buffoon. He was an evil, again, playing evil because I'm challenging myself, trying to get out of the lawful good thing that I normally like to play, and challenging myself with, I want to make a character that's lawful evil, who is just a dick, but he has his own code of ethic. He'll kill people if he needs to because he's a noble elf, and he comes from a house that is, doing some shady dealings. And all sorts of, talks bad to others, hates the lower class. But every time he talks bad about the party and the people who, are working hard and the lawful good and stuff like that, stuff backfires. A mechanic to sorcerers in 5th edition is actually chaos magic, where if you crit, you actually roll random spells based on what you do. And again, that came into play with the fact that my character was supposed to have things backfire. He died because the party hated him so much, one of them kicked him down a hole. And I think that's the best way to kind of send off a character. Now, a good DM wouldn't have let him die like that, because that really pulls the player out of experience. But I think if that character was going to go out, it's down a hole, kicked by another party member for, obvious reasons. And it was a good thing that that's how he went out instead of dying in glorious combat, because that's not how it goes. That guy was too, look at me, I am a great wizard, huh? No magic, that kind of thing. I don't know what I was doing there. And again, that's another example of how I'm kind of seeing characters now. They're not just the black and white, good versus evil. You've got your knight in shining armor. You got the sorcerer with the dark necromancy. You can have those shades of gray. Some people play characters more conventional. This isn't in role playing, but this is a character a friend plays in World of Warcraft. Which I find very charming and I love it. He plays a tax collector. He's a rogue tax collector who hounds other people to pay up for his lord and stuff like that, and he will go out of his way to really enforce that roleplay with small things like charging people for services. If someone gives him something for free, he will always pay back because nothing is free in this world. That kind of thing. And you can translate that to other role-playing games like in here where a tax collector could fall under one of the many different archetypes that this game sets out and has bonuses for. Again, both Pathfinder playtest and 5th edition have sections fully on these kind of backgrounds. There's a whole section of it in 5th edition on page 124 if you guys are looking. And it talks about it. It's like you could be an acolyte, a charlatan, a criminal, an entertainer, let's see here, folk hero, guild artisan, let's see here, guild merchant, hermit, let's see, yeah, there's just, there's sailor, you know, you could be just a rugged sailor who, you know, gets wrapped up into some trouble after a group of adventurers like sail along with you, and you're very kind of just trying to get out of the situation as much as possible, but the story keeps bringing you in, and then finally there's a story hook that the DM can give you later that you attach onto. And one thing to keep in mind is DMs love having backgrounds of your characters to work with. Time and time again, I see that the more engaged players get is when their character has something to help expand them. If your character is, you know, always on the sidelines and the big baddie's always over here, but the group doesn't really have a tie into it, it really kind of pulls them. They're like, all right, yeah, let's keep going. But I always kind of find ways to bring NPCs and kind of interact the player and kind of challenge them into situations. If you watch the last episode I made about how to write out a character, I killed off an NPC that was with the group since probably the first couple of months of the campaign to fit my goal of giving them a reason to go after this bad guy, because for the longest time they were kind of lingering about not knowing where to go until I gave them that kind of motivation. And the same goes for smaller stuff. I played a innkeeper fighter who was a replacement to the wizard that fell down the hole. I think it was a sorcerer because he had wild magic, who fell down the hole. He was a fun character. He unfortunately that campaign broke up, and I was never invited back. I don't know if they just didn't like me or they hated my characters. But one of the fun things was he was very confident, but his charisma was an 8, so he had a lot of negative rolls on charisma. But that didn't stop him from trying to be cheery and outgoing. And a lot of people think charisma is just about speech, but it's also about physical appearance. He was a very ragged innkeeper, very bland, kind of ugly, kind of lopsided face. He was a pumpkin. But what made him charming and fun for the party was he kind of accidentally became this pseudo-leader while other NPCs were out and about, where they would kind of defer to him, and he would roll his dice, and he would be getting critical hits or critical misses. There was no, like, in-between. The dice is kind of determined how this character's path led. At one point, he gets arrested by the guards because he tries to be charismatic and trying to, you know, talk them into letting him go see their guard captain, and he slips them a bribe, just trying to be charismatic and friendly, but his charisma was so bad that it was like a 2 or a 3 after, you know, using his buffs, that they arrested him because they thought he was like a low-life beggar trying to sneak their way in to steal stuff. And it was just that kind of thing where the actions drove how the character had a personality. Because at first it was like, I'm an innkeeper, everything's great. But then I kind of came up with the slogan for him. He's like, a charisma of 8 but a confidence of an 18. You know, where the numbers don't match up. And he was a very fun character to play, and I want to bring him back. Again, he's an innkeeper. Why is an innkeeper with a group of druids and magicians and all these people trying to stop dragons? Who knows? The group comes in, burns down his inn, and he wants revenge, or he's just like, well, I got nowhere else to go. I might as well get my money back for this from the dragon horde. So, another example of just kind of where to go with that stuff. Going back to kind of backgrounds and stuff, in the Player's Handbook for 5th edition, it's an optional kind of way to build your character, and there's some small perks to it. In Pathfinder, they're really encouraging these backstories with perks that are positive or negative, and I kind of want to read off what they are for this. And I just got the playtest. It just came in the mail recently, so I'm excited to talk about character creation. I might go through once I learn how to play and give my thoughts about it. But yeah, we'll go for let's go street urchin. So you eke out of the living of pickpocketing in the streets of a major city, you never knowing where you'd find your next meal. While some folk adventurers for glory, your adventure is a means of survival. Great start. Right off the bat, I think of Quoth from the Kingslayer series. I think of what's his name? Brent Weeks wrote a series. It was kind of like a ninja with the Kakari, and I'll put the book series. Really, really great. But he was also a street urchin that became an assassin. Let's see here. But this, it has an effect on your character. Choose 2 ability boosts. One may be for dexterity or intelligence. The other one will be a free action. You can pickpocketing as a skill feat, and you're trained in the underworld lore skill. So your character could be, a wizard or like a sorcerer or something who has magical powers, but he's also a street urchin. So you see the sorcerer who he has this innate power. He doesn't know what to do with it, but he grew up on the streets, so he has this kind of urge to, he's in a social situation. He's like, oh yeah, it's this magical thing. Oh yep. Yep. Oh, look at prestidigitation right over here. Yep. Oh, look over here. Look. Oh, what's that? Fireworks. And he's pickpocketing something, or, I'm just coming up with ideas already, just seeing kind of the possibilities and ways to divert from the norm. And I find that it's a great way to kind of express stuff. I want to look at another one. Let's do 5th edition this time. Like a guild membership, a guild artisan. What would be an odd way to roleplay a guild artisan with like a druid? What's a druid background with a guild artisan do? Let's see. You are a member of the Artisans Guild, skilled in the particular field and closely associated with the other artisans. You're well-established part of the merchant world, freed by talent and wealth from the construction of feudal social order. You learned your skills as an apprentice to master artisan under the sponsorship of your guild until you became a master of your own right. And it's insight and persuasion. You could probably be some sort of, halfling or human druid who, you go from small village to small village. And yeah, this one's a little harder, but I want to make it work somehow. You're guild artisan. You're very good at cloth work, like in your textiles, and you've kindly became a name of being a traveler between these things. And you spend so much time in nature, you've kind of bonded with it, and you kind of more associate with this magical essence because you're always out in the wild. You're always in between towns, and one thing leads to another. You start kind of more of like a shamanistic bond with nature, and you have your moments where a life or death situation out on the road one day, bandits and a wild wolf comes by and nurses you back to health, and you learn the ways of shape-shifting. Boom. And then you have that kind of gift, so everybody's like, oh, it's the normal merchant. You have kind of a hobble to you, but you're strong. You're bound to this spiritual awakening and stuff. And you can kind of see what I'm getting at here is working character traits, not for the normal social order. Social orders are easy, or the social order isn't the best way to describe it. The character tropes can be circumvented using a lot of different ways, and inspiration comes from a lot of different areas. Talking to other people, seeing how other people play, listening to other YouTubers or podcasts talk about how their characters play, and seeing how characters develop, because you don't have to have an entire story arc for your first character. Play what you're comfortable with. Learn how to play the game. After your 3rd or 4th campaign, maybe you're playing with friends that you've played for a very, very long time and want to spice things up a bit. Do something different. Do something that really kind of gets you excited to engage in the role-playing aspect, not alone with the combat. And combat should always be a secondary option to a good role-playing event. And I think a lot of RPGs now are really encouraging the role-playing aspect because that's been lost over the ages, and people aren't really seeing that for being the best thing. And work with your dungeon master. Work with your game master. When you have a new character coming up, just pull them aside. I love to pull people aside and be like, hey, it's like, what do you have for your new character? And they'll be like, well, you see, my character is a Tengu, but he doesn't want the rest of the party to know that because they kind of have a bad reputation in this part of the world. So my character's always got a mask on. I'm like, okay, that's interesting. You're a rogue. You kind of using the disguise tactics. You really kind of want to cover yourself up. Why are you with this group? It's like, well, with this group, we we're having a good time, in town at the bar, and I'm drunk enough, and they convince me to, partake in this kind of small quest that leads up and up and up, and I become friends with them, but I can't tell them I'm a Tengu because then they're going to think I'm crazy, and I don't want to lose that friendship. And so you can always, not really to spite the player, but kind of work with him. And if a character wants to be a very roguish rogue or a thief or something like that, notes. Talk to your DM, be like, all right, I'm gonna look around, and then just slide pieces of paper and just be like, I'm gonna roll a stealth of. You can do like a quiet little. Okay, that's a 12. GM, I rolled a 12 on my stealth check. I want to kind of stealth away and explore this hallway of this mansion to see if I can find any cool books or kind of hear any good gossip of the nobility. That kind of stuff. I eat that stuff up. My players don't do that enough. And if you're watching this, notes. Yeah, so play around with that kind of stuff is what I'm getting at. There's so much more information to help you out with that kind of things. And if you don't have a good sense of kind of how to break the mold, listen to fantasy books. There's a lot of great fantasy books out there that can really give you a different perspective on how top tier writers or even more new up and coming novelists will write and talk about characters. And if not, there's a lot of cool things. You can look into the villain codex for Pathfinder. Oh god, have not tried to do this yet, and there's a poster. So the villain codex is great because it talks about a lot of kind of sub factions and other things like Arcane Society, Nature's Scourge, the Regal Court, the Ruthless Brigands, the Marauders, Pirates, Secret Society, Sinister Cults, Slavers, a Merchant Caravan, a Diabolic Church. There's a lot of ways, if you want to play an evil character but you don't want it to, the character to be purely evil, have him work for that made a weird sound. Have him work for a bigger evil, and then if you're playing a homebrew group, have that evil kind of come to light. And either give your character a moral choice, work with the people you've been with for a while, or betray them. And you can kind of work out that kind of dilemma with your players. And if your group is all evil, they won't care. They'll work with you. If it's that half and half, which is a really rare thing to do, there's a morality choice there that you can shift the player either into the group and have them switch alignment, or you can have them split up, and then it's another good opportunity to kind of twist things on their end. It's we still need him around, but he works for this evil cult, and we don't know how we feel about it. There's that good dynamic there. So check out a lot of these supplementary stuff for many different reasons. I thought that this was some sort of campaign setting, but no, just a bunch of evil groups with a lot of static characters that you can use for campaigns. But I found a lot of good character ideas come through on this one. But yeah, just work with your DM. If you have ideas for characters that you want, feedback on, I read the comments. Send a comment to me in the section down below. I'll read it. I'll give you feedback. I'll let you know, if I find it interesting or if it's something I might steal myself, because I'm always looking for ideas. So, thank you very much for watching. I have been Kamter, your Tavern Keeper, and I shall see you next time in the tavern. Fare thee well.